my name is Christina, and today we are claiming that GE requirements should be geared towards a student's specific major. My three claims are that students will graduate faster, that students will save thousands of dollars, and that the graduation rate would increase if we only had to take like a lower amount of classes that only were for our majors. So first, students will graduate faster. According to Stanford University, an average of 40% of students drop out after their first year of college. So that's a lot. It's almost like half this room if you like Stanford. A lot of them say that they don't expect to take classes that aren't directly linked to their major. So for example, if you're a business major, you kind of expect to take math and English, but not bio and history, let's say. And also according to www.collegeexpress.com, in today's society, the average student does not graduate in 4 years. It's looking more like 5 to 6 years now instead of the 4-year requirement. According to fellow students that I go to Cal State Fullerton with, I asked them like a little survey about our topic, and they say that the long years and time put into getting a bachelor's degree is discouraging to them when wanting to graduate and start their careers, because they just want to do it as fast as possible, and like 5 to 6 years is not really that fast. Yeah, alright. And so my secondary claim is that students will save thousands of dollars. So the average tuition cost at a state university is $9,800 annually, and the average tuition cost at a UC is about $26,000 annually. If a student got their degree from Cal State in 2 to 3 years, instead of 5 to 6 years, they would be spending roughly around $20,000 to $30,000 after graduating, instead of having to pay $50,000 to $60,000. And that also goes for a student that goes to the UC, because of course they're more expensive. So instead of spending for 2 to 3 years, well, if they went for 2 to 3 years, they would be spending $40,000 to $60,000 after graduating, rather than $100,000 to $120,000 after graduating. My third secondary claim is that the graduation rates would increase. So, according to fellow students at Fullerton College that I did a little survey on, the majority of them stated that if achieving your bachelor's degree did not take so long and cost so much money, that most of them would be more confident in graduating. And according to www.gerequirements.com/analysis, students taking classes that have nothing directly to do with their major feel like it's like they're wasting their time. So, I mean, realistically, yeah, they have a point. I mean, it is expensive, but I think it would be better if students did take classes that were just for their major. So if you are a business major, that you don't have to take bio and history, just to take like your Englishes and math. And then I think like if you want the option, then you can take other ones, but it shouldn't be necessary to have to take the ones that you don't feel necessary. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Jake. I am doing the negative side of the topic that Christina had just mentioned. GE requirements should be geared towards a student's specific major. Just to repeat, she said that her claims were 1, students will graduate faster, 2, students will save thousands, and 3, more students would end up graduating. I'd like to point out that the topic being GE requirements should be geared towards a student-specific major doesn't actually imply that it is abolishing GE requirements altogether. We're not saying that there won't be those average 2 to 3 years of GE classes that you take. Those will probably still exist, they'll just be geared towards your major. So say you're a math major, you're gonna take more math classes rather than taking the classes she mentioned like bio or the other classes. But it's not saying we're gonna completely get rid of GE requirements. If she had done that and implemented a plan, then I would also agree that yes, students probably would graduate faster in that manner. And then she pointed out that students will save thousands. Again, like I was saying, if you're still in school close to the same amount of time, just doing major classes rather than doing GE classes, it's not gonna save you much more money. I mean, you're still, say you take off a semester or 2 now because you don't have to take math 3 times because you keep failing it. Sorry. But if you don't have to take these extra GE classes, but you're still taking major classes, extra ones that are geared towards it, I mean, it doesn't save you that much money. And my other argument against that is, I'm pretty sure, I didn't catch her number for state schools annual tuition, but $26,000 annually for UC I feel is a pretty good investment for your future. I mean, I'd be willing to make it, but. And then, her third claim was more students would end up graduating. And she gave an excellent percentage actually, about 40% dropping out in the first year. I think that would work well with her third claim, that more students would end up graduating because they're a little off-put, as it seemed, by GE classes. Like she said, students don't want to be taking classes that they feel are unnecessary. I hear a lot of people always saying, I basically took that exact same class in high school. I took bio in high school, it's the same thing, blah, blah, blah. But my question is, how much of you guys actually retained that information? And for me, personally, I think that having general education requirements is actually entirely beneficial for us, as an education perspective as a whole. It doesn't really hurt to just, in general, have more knowledge. I mean, not that, I'm in international sales, not that biology is ever gonna come up for me, but hey, maybe it will one day. And that's my first negative.
Hi, I'm Kaylee, and I'm just going to be reiterating mostly what Christina had said about the GE requirements should be geared towards a student-specific major. Like she said, the 3 secondary claims are students will graduate faster, students will save thousands of dollars, and the graduation rate would increase. Students will graduate faster because by gearing GE requirements towards a student-specific major, they'll, like what Jake was saying, it's not that we wanted to add like more classes for their major. We were saying that we would just cut those ones out, so that's why it would save time, which means that they would graduate faster. Also, time basically is money, so by that kind of brings me to my next point, which means students will save thousands of dollars. By having to pay so much money per year in tuition, students, the average student mostly work full-time jobs, and then full-time jobs and full-time school doesn't really mix well. I'm a perfect example of that. Because I've already had to drop a class because I'm so worried about paying for stuff. So full-time jobs gives you less time for schoolwork and in class, which leads to failing classes or barely getting by and having to drop classes for lack of time to put into getting good grades. According to an older study from the year 2000 on brockport.edu, not only are students more likely to work today, but they're more likely to work full-time. The share of students working full-time while going to school full-time has nearly doubled, rising from 5.6% in 1985 to 10.4% in 2000, which is an old statistic, but you can imagine how much it's skyrocketed since then, because that's close to 14 years ago. So the third point, the graduation rate would increase because by gearing the GE requirements towards their specific major, they would, like I said in my previous points, they'd be saving money in the long run by saving time focusing on their GE requirements that actually have to do with their major rather than the ones that don't, which is why Christina made that point of that 40% of students drop out after the first year. Although the argument of having like GE requirements is to get like a well-rounded education, Jake was saying like that most people don't retain the information that they learned in high school, which is basically what we learned our first couple years in college. They're just kind of reiterating what we already learned. I feel like if we had like a stronger system for our like high school education or elementary education, like other countries in Europe, I think that would have a significant impact on like not having to take as many GE requirements also.
Thank you.
Alright, so my name's Kevin, and let's see, I'm gonna touch base with the disadvantages and how impractical, changing the general ed requirements would be. First off, let's assume that removing GE requirements comes into effect. Now, one of the claims were students are graduating faster. But what does this mean? It means that they're taking fewer classes, and it means that they're having a diminished education. Theoretically, they're the higher someone's education, the higher they're up on the pay scale. So I have a statistic here from nces.ed.gov. For young adults ages 25 to 34 who work full-time throughout a full year, higher education attainment was associated with higher median earnings. The pattern of higher median earnings corresponding with higher levels of education attainment was consistent for in years 1995, 2000, and 2005 through 2011. So for example, young adults with a bachelor's degree consistently had a higher median earnings than those with less education. So if you're talking about, lowering the standards of a bachelor's degree, wouldn't that entail that employers would obviously pay less for a less educated individual or worker? So yes, they are graduating faster, but they're getting into careers sooner, and that ultimately are going to pay less. To touch base with the students that save money, ideally that sounds great, but that only helps in the long run, because the ones that actually pursue a higher education are going to be making more money. They're going to be on that. For instance, trends.collegeboard.org states that for full-time year-round students, median earnings of 45 to 49-year-olds with high school diplomas are 33% higher than those of 25 to 29 years old. The difference is 16% for four-year college graduates and larger for those with advanced degrees. So what this is saying is that as you get older and progress through your career, your wage exponentially grows. So ultimately, it's a small sacrifice in the beginning, but ultimately it'll pay off in the long run. The statement that more students would end up graduating I just wanna say that getting an education or college degree is completely voluntary. I think it's up to the students to pick a career that, you know, properly suits them. They have to keep in mind that if they're maintaining a job, that they do not feel bogged down, or pick a career that's less strenuous if they cannot handle it. But another thing is that if more students are ended up graduating, ultimately it'll harm them. I have a statistic here from EPI.org. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has consistently projected the number of college graduates in the U.S. labor market will continue to match the number of job openings requiring college education. Indeed, BLS finds that many of the largest areas of future growth in the American economy are in occupations requiring little skill, not even a 2-year post-secondary credential, waiters, etc., etc. This reality will not be changed if only colleges can make their graduates more attractive candidates. So what this is saying is that as of now, the amount of college graduates meets the same amount of jobs that require that education. So by removing the requirements, the GE requirements, you're lowering the standards of a college degree, which means more people are graduating with that degree. They are demanding the same wages, so now this would cause a higher unemployment among the college grads. Another thing is that perhaps it would not be a good idea to remove the G requirements, just because most employers see that college grads need to become well-rounded individuals. A statistic here from Business Time. Another employer survey, this one by staffing company Adecco, turns up similar results. The company says in a statement 44% of respondents cited soft skills such as communication, critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration as the area with the biggest gap. Only half as many say a lack of technical skills is a pain point. As much as academics go on about the lack of math and science skills, bosses are more concerned with organizational and interpersonal proficiency. The National Association of Colleges and Employers surveyed more than 200 employers about their top 10 priorities in new hires. Overwhelmingly, they want candidates who are team players, problem solvers, and can play, organize, prioritize their work. Technical and computer-related know-how placed further down the list. Jobs are going unfilled as a result, which hurts companies and employees. The annual Global Talent Shortage Survey from Manpower Group finds that nearly 1 in 5 employers worldwide cannot fill positions because they can't find people with soft skills. Specifically, companies say candidates are lacking in motivation, interpersonal skills, appearance, punctuality, and flexibility. So again, I do not think that changing the G requirement is a good idea. I don't think there's significant cost for that, other than just time. Yeah.
Right, it's the negative growth.
Yep.
Okay, so just to reiterate a couple points, students are graduating faster was the first claim, and like Kevin had just touched on, they're taking fewer classes, which means a diminished education, which is one reason why I don't think we should change the GE requirements from how they are. Students save money, taking less classes and saving money on books and other fees like that, possibly, because you're taking less of the general education classes. But like I was stating in my argument, if you're just gearing the GE towards the majors, there's still other classes besides just your major classes. We're not getting rid of it completely, and so yeah, it'll save you some money, but like I was saying, isn't your future worth the investment? and then more students would end up graduating. Like Kevin was just touching on, was getting an education or college degree is completely voluntary, and it's up to the student to pick something that is something they want to take, so that they don't feel bogged down or anything by it. And basically, I feel that we shouldn't change GE requirements from the way we are, or from the way it is currently, unless we can come up with a plan that is both effective and beneficial to the student and to the student's future outside of being a student. That's all I got.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of touch back on something that Jay said. So there are a few things that I completely disagree on. For example, that he said that students would only finish 1 to 2 semesters earlier if you took out some of the G's, but actually they would finish a lot more than that, because if you think about it, if you're a drama major, I mean, I don't really see the point of having to take math, right? Math is not just one class, there's different levels of math. You know, there's math 41, 60, 110, 115, 135, etc. So if you don't have to take all those different levels of math, you're cutting out more than just one semester. And that also goes for, like, if you're a drama major, there's also like bio, history, I mean, different levels of these classes, so it's more than just 1 or 2 semesters. Also, that yes, investing in your future is important, but most students work full time and have to pay off loans. So one of the things that they're taking into consideration is being in debt in the future, which a lot of us, I'm sure, don't want to be in debt after graduating. Because for example, like my stepdad went to UCLA and UC Santa Barbara, and he's 34 years old, and he's still like paying off his tuition and everything. And so yeah, so that kind of sucks. And a lot of students aren't willing to pay that much money. I know Jake, in his own opinion, thinks that, yeah, you know, $26,000, it's worth it. But a lot of students are thinking like, man, I still want to have a life. You know, like, if I have to work this much to be able to pay for my education, having to work this much is going to interfere with my education, because you're having to work harder, take up more of your time to be able to even afford to take these classes. So, I mean, it's more like of an opinion thing, you know? So, I mean, $26,000 is a lot. I'd rather get the same education at a Cal State, which is like 1/3 the price. So, I just look at it. Also, both of you guys actually stated diminishing education. I don't see how it would diminish your education. I mean, you're still taking classes and going to college. It's just that the classes that you will be taking are more geared towards your major. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, if you're a business major and you're taking just math and English instead of bio and history, it's not really diminishing it. It's more like narrowing it down to what you really need to get your major. And like the survey I took, most students said that they feel like they're taking a lot of classes that they don't need. So with taking out the classes that they feel like they don't need and taking only the ones that go for their major, students will be more focused and motivated, because that's what they feel like they went to college for, is to take the classes that they really need for their major, not the ones that aren't directly linked to it. Also, I feel that students would do better in classes that they want to take rather than failing the ones that they feel like they have to be forced to take. So that's another key point too.
Did you remember that these are 4 minutes?
4 minutes? I thought there were seven.
The last 4 speeches are 4 minutes each.
Oh, okay, well.
That's okay. That's all right. It suddenly dawned on me, so. Nobody's getting there, but
Yeah.
I got you. You know, just, so these are 4-minute speeches that we're hearing.
So, let's see, just to summarize our main argument is, I don't think time consuming, like what they say that GE requirements are time consuming is big enough to actually change the whole system that's already in place. I think our system is pretty successful. I wanna say that can I call time?
Sure, you need to use some of your prep time?
No, just like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Time out from the game.
So, there, we didn't hear, an implementation of this plan. So, all we have to go off is that the GE requirements are gonna be completely slashed from our curriculum. But this leaves a lot to open questions, you know, what happens to the degrees? Do they change? Are they changed? For example, is it, you can almost say, is it downgraded linearly? You know, does the associates take less time than the bachelors go down more, and then the doctoral and the masters? So that's a big question. Another thing I have to say is that on account of the diminished education, I think it is, you know, if you're only geared to know about your own major, when you actually go into that career, I mean, that career isn't, you're not gonna be just a robot, you know, putting in and punching into the computer. You're actually gonna have to deal with other people, and if you work for a business, they're gonna have to work for with other businesses, and it's just gonna be a, you know, intra-connected world. And I think what college serves as is to promote a stronger individual, and by removing the G requirements, I don't think that, you know, it's gonna help out. And that's all I have to say for now.
Okay, so, first of all, I wanna say that personally, I think that a lot of GE classes that we take, that are just like kind of trying to get you to be like a more well-rounded person has a lot of busy work, which also leads to like, I mean, I don't really personally, I don't have enough time to like just do like random little worksheets that don't really mean anything for my future. That's why a lot of the time, like a lot of people, have to drop out of a lot of their classes their first years. And then I wasn't saying, or we weren't saying that, like, sorry, one second. We weren't saying that we wanted to get rid of all the GE requirements. We were saying that we just wanted to condense them, and fewer classes wouldn't diminish our education. We're just trying to make it so that we learn more about our major, like, I don't know how to explain. We were saying that taking fewer classes for your GEs, you'd get better grades, which means that you're putting more time and effort into those classes, like one at a time, rather than like having to take all those other classes that don't really mean anything. Students graduating faster has nothing to do with their future pay, only the degree that they earn. And we were saying that how would an employer know if you graduated in 3 years rather than 5 or 6 if you had the same degree / like title? And like what I was saying before about like better grades in your classes, it would look better on like resumes. Instead of taking so many credits, you can't focus on like as much on each class. And we weren't saying that it was it wasn't only time consuming. Like I said before, the like time is money, so like the time it takes also costs a lot of money. And I did actually say a plan that we would we wouldn't take away the GE requirements completely, but we would just take away the ones that were unnecessary. And then in the plan I said that if we did that, we would have to raise high school and elementary education like we would like other European countries. And then I think that Jake had said higher education would mean a higher pay. We weren't saying that, I can't remember who said it. Higher education would be higher pay. I don't understand how taking away some GE requirements would not be like higher education. Like we're still saying that you take GE requirements, they're just gonna be a little bit different rather than like she was saying that if you're a business major, like not taking biology or something like that. And that is all.
All right, thank you. Why don't you guys stay where you are, and we'll just talk to you. Look, this is going to be, well, no, here's the deal. This is going to be kind of a rare opportunity because we won't have a chance to do a whole discussion of each debate afterwards because we don't have time. We're trying to do 2 debates a day. So I appreciate that you guys went on the first day. It's tough. You're having to be ready before everybody else, and it's a little uncomfortable that you now become the subject of an individual critique. But the goal here is for everybody to learn how to do these things better. So I think it's going to help if I talk about this and give you some detail on it. And I'm going to try not to demean anybody or make comments that would suggest that you are bad people, because I don't think that any of you are bad. I think you guys tried to do a good job. But there are some things that are problematic in the debate, and some of them have to do with the topic, but some of them also have to do with execution. So let's start off with the first affirmative constructive. All right, Christina, you do have an organized constructive. That's good. And you've got 3 supporting claims, but they are all significance claims. You do not have an inherency argument here. There's no explanation of why people have to take GE requirements, what the GE requirements are, how much of the time it takes up. You keep talking about, for instance, how much time that takes up. Well, how many units does somebody need to have for a major? How long does it take to complete that? the GE requirements that you're talking about getting rid of, at some point or other you say, well, there are some that are unnecessary. Well, which ones are unnecessary and how is that determined? You say, well, we maybe need to keep some of the math and the English ones, but we don't need to keep the biology ones, for instance. That's the one you mentioned. Okay, well, how is that determined? What's the plans? Is your plan to say, there will be no biology requirements for general education? Then you need to say that.
Oh no, I only put like if you're like a specific major, like a business major, you wouldn't have to take biology.
Well, that's what you have to say. In other words, you have to tell us that people have to take these things. There's no evidence that says that anybody is hindered by having to take these GE requirements. You're making an inference that they are hindered in some way.
Oh no, yeah, I said that like if you are a business major, that math and English would be relevant to your major, but
That-
why would
that-
bio and history?
Yes, I know that that's what you said. Okay, but you don't have a plan that says that, and you don't have any proof. Where's the proof that people who are business majors have to take biology classes?
It's a GE requirement, so yeah.
Where is that in the affirmative case?
He's just saying that we don't get
Yeah.
Okay, that's your inherency point. You have to show that people are required to take X number of classes. So let's just say something hypothetical. In order for you to have a major, you have to take 32 units in that major.
Okay.
Does that sound about right?
Okay, sure.
I mean, I don't. Let's say you have to have 120 units to graduate in a 4-year degree. Is that about right? You see, if you say you don't know, then all of a sudden I'm immediately suspect about the inherency issue. This is what you guys are supposed to be talking about. So, how many units is required for a major? How many of the units is required to get a bachelor's degree? What many units are GE requirements? That's all part of describing what the present system is. And there needs to be an inherency argument in the first affirmative constructive. You need to tell us why this is a requirement. Why can't people just take business classes?
They can. They
Well,
just
that's not
won't
our-
get-
Okay,
they
That's
just
not
won't
our
get it.
claim though, like we still have to have some GE though.
okay. Why can't people just take business classes and English classes?
You mean like everybody?
Yeah, anybody who wants to be a business major, like you're talking about, if I just take my 32 units in business and 10 units in English, why do I need to do more than that?
Well, if you want to get your degree.
That's the inherency argument. In other words, to get a bachelor's degree requires that you have these kinds of units in these many places. That's what you're saying is the source of the problem. You have to have a description of what the source of the problem is there. As far as I know, now, let's assume that the audience was all ignorant. Now, you're dealing with college students, so they aren't ignorant of what the requirements are in college. But say you were talking to a general audience. They don't know what's required. They don't know what the issues are here. You haven't described what you say, well, they can't get it done in 4 years, now it's 5 and 6 years. Well, is it 5 and 6 years because they can't pass their math requirement? That's not because they have a requirement, that's because they can't pass the damn class. All right?
Hey, I told you that in confidence.
Well, I wasn't pointing at anybody, but so the question is, what are the requirements? And that's what the inherency argument is, a description of what is required now, what happens now, and why is that causing this problem. You don't have a description of what's happening now. You only have a description of what you think the problem is, but not why you have that problem. That's what's missing from the first affirmative. The other thing that's missing is a specific policy that you want to put in place. You've got your proposition stated that you want to have an emphasis on GE requirements, that the GE requirements should just emphasize people's majors. And that's where you come up with this idea, for example, of if you're a business major, maybe you take some English classes and some math classes or something like that. How is that determined? All right, so for instance, you were saying you're a drama major, let's say, because I think the drama major got mentioned as an example, right? So you're a drama major. So what kinds of classes would a drama major be required to take as GE that would emphasize their major?
English, theater, arts, stuff like that.
Okay. Why not math?
It has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Why would I?
Let me give you a for instance. All right. What kinds of classes do you have to take as a drama major? Do you take a stagecraft class?
I don't major in that.
So, well, see, that's one of the problems. We don't know what's going on here. If you were a drama major, almost certainly one of the classes that you'd have to take would be a stagecraft class, which requires your ability to build sets, plan budgets, those kinds of things, which may have some math requirements. I don't know that they've got a prerequisite for those classes, but you have to be able to do certain kinds of things. So how are you going to determine which classes, which GE requirements are going to be emphasized with the majors? There has to be a way to do that, and you need to have a plan that says how you're going to do that. You know generally what you want to do, but we're talking about a nuts and bolts policy here, and if you don't spell it out in some way, you're not going to be able to argue about it because it'll constantly change. And here's the example. They say, well, you're going to be taking more, under your policy, they're going to be emphasizing GE requirements that focus on the particular major. So their assumption is that you get rid of the biology requirement, but you put in some requirement that emphasizes the major. So you're still going to be taking the same number of classes. How are you going to save time? And then you come back and say, oh, no, you wouldn't have to do that. Well, how do we know what you have to do if it's not spelled out someplace in your policy? That's a place where that argument gets confusing because you don't have a policy that's spelled out. So the inherency issue is the first main problem that you have. The other thing is that you have to have a policy in this particular case. If you want to say that people can get a bachelor's degree with just meeting the requirements of a major, however many units that is, I was giving you the hypothetical before, 32 units for instance, and then 20 units of some other thing, so that you only have to have 52 units in order to get a bachelor's degree, well, that would cut your time in college in half, right? Which is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what would be required? What's going to be required in order to get the bachelor's degree that you're talking about? You should spell that out. How many units are going to be required? How many units are going to be in the major? And what the non-major units are going to be. If you're going to dance around this issue as a way to address problems later on, then you've got to have that spelled out at the beginning of the argument so that everybody knows that they're arguing about the same kind of thing. Right? The survey information, by the way, I think the three issues that you cited, the significance issues, are pretty good issues. They're nicely developed. The first one talks about people dropping out after the first year. And I think that that's an important argument because there are all kinds of reasons why people might drop out after the first year. You're kind of tying it into the GE requirements. I'm not sure that there's a strong enough link here in your argument to prove that the GE requirements are the thing that cause people to drop out after the first year. Right? One of the things that I'm surprised that the negative doesn't talk about is how many people have a major when they start college. Let me ask, how many of you in here right now have a declared major? All right. And how many of you have changed that major? All right. So we have 3/4 of the class have a declared major, and half of those people have changed that major at least once.
Why didn't you tell me this before?
Well, it's one of those things that I think you could discover, especially at a community college. You got a lot of people who how many people start off with declared majors at a state college or university? I'm assuming it's a large percentage because that's kind of a requirement, or that they have to declare it pretty quickly. I don't know what the rules are on that. That's another inherency issue on those kinds of issues. But like when you're talking about community colleges, there are a lot of people who come in here, they don't have a major, they don't know what they're doing, or they change their major 2 or 3 times before they find what they're looking for. Is the reason that people are dropping out because there's so many onerous GE requirements, or is it because they don't know what it is they want to do? and they're going through that process. I think that you have we have a barrier here. There's something that's causing students to drop out, and it's your inference that it's got to do with the number of requirements that are taking place. But if I was the negative, I'd be looking at all the other reasons that people drop out. College is expensive, that's true. All right, but if you're dropping out of after the first year, you haven't incurred more than a year's worth of expenses. So I'm not sure that that's the reason that people are dropping out, because they can't afford it. I mean, if they couldn't afford 1 year, what makes you think they would be able to afford the second year that would be required in order to get this now modified bachelor's degree? By the way, another thing, just like for the second negative, what does this mean for 2-year schools? Will we now be degree granting institutions if we provide only GE requirements? What kind of degree do people get? Is it separate? An AA is not going to be a BA, but you don't need to have a BA if you have an AA in a particular field. That's a problematic question, and to me that's a potential disadvantage argument. I have a little bit of an issue with the casual evidence of surveying students in other places and then using that as information in your presentation. I'm not saying that you couldn't talk about that in your argument, but as use of proof, I'm not sure that that's very representative or typical of how students feel. That might be the people that you talk to, but let's talk to people who've graduated from college and see how they feel about the time that they spent doing those kinds of things. The ones who are getting their degrees, if there's some survey about their opinions on those sorts of things, there might very well be something that would support your position on this. The cost issue that you bring up is a good one. You've got hypotheticals that you're talking about. So hypothetical, if you took fewer classes, this is how much money you would save. Okay, but how many fewer classes are you going to take, and how many fewer years are you going to be spending? That's hard to tell because the plan is ambiguous. And so when they come up and they say, well, you're going to be taking fewer classes, and so you're going to be less educated, and you say, oh no, they're not going to be less educated, they're going to be taking classes where you're emphasizing the GE requirements in your major, and then they come back and say, well, then you're still taking the same number of classes, there isn't going to be any savings, and then you come back and say, oh no, because they won't have to take GE requirements. It's like the ground keeps shifting under the argument there, and that's not a legitimate way of engaging. Oh, I thought there was somebody knocking on the window there. It's just somebody's phone going off. Okay. That was creepy. All right, so the affirmative needs a clearer inherency argument, and you need a more structured plan, something that's more specific. All right, on the first negative, I think you've got a good general idea here about what you want to say. You do argue that in essence it's not very clear what the plan is. I think that's a good argument to develop early on, but you need to make some arguments about that. So what's the consequence of not having a plan? It's hard to compare what they want to have to what we have because we don't know what the differences are going to be. That's the kind of argument that you need to make off of this point. I think you also need a general defense of general education and why it's important. Yeah, you kind of suggest this a little bit, that people want to be doing more than the well-rounded sort of thing. Jake, you largely skipped over that first point that they presented about students who drop out of the system and how long it's now taking students to get through the system. I think you ought to be arguing the source of the additional 5 or 6 years instead of going from a 4-year degree to a 5 or 6 year degree, which is an argument that they're using to justify cutting down the number of requirements. You ought to be arguing that there's a reason that it's become 5 or 6 years, and it doesn't have anything to do with the difficulty of the classes that people have. It's access issues. Public universities are offering fewer classes because of financial issues, and so it's tough for people to graduate in that amount of time because they just can't get the classes that they need in order to graduate. Or, for instance, it's finance issues. Students take fewer classes because they can't afford to, so they do an extra year to be able to pick up those classes later on. I mean, there are pretty standard kinds of issues that you could be talking about. It's not that, look, the number of units required for a bachelor's degree, again, are hypothetical because we're not quite sure on it. I think I'm close to it, something like 120, 130, something like that. All right? That hasn't changed in 40 or 50 years. So why is it, so much harder for people now to get through school in 4 years than it was 20 years ago to get through in 4 years when they had the same number of units required? And there've got to be other explanations rather than it's just the units that are being required. That's what the affirmative is saying. It's the units that are required that would make this a problem. What else is there? And by the way, one of the things that you point out, and they would acknowledge, because as their plan gets modified during the debate, you start adding things to it. Now it's not just we're going to change the GE requirements, we're also going to change the high schools. All right. Well, one of the problems is we have a lot of students who are not prepared for college, going to college. I mean, I'm sure all of you in here have had classes. If you haven't had to take the classes, you have had classmates who are having to take remedial classes. An English class, for instance, a 60 English class is not it's a college level class. You get college credit for it, but it doesn't count towards your degree because you're not at the college level yet. You got to be at a 100 level in order for it to transfer and to give you credit on it. So when people are spending extra time taking math 15 or 40 or English 39 or 60, that's because they were underprepared to get into college. It's not the curriculum in college that is the problem. It's their lack of preparation that is causing that problem. That should be part of the argument that you're making, that the source of this problem is something else rather than the number of units that are required. The argument that the investment is worth it, I think that's a good argument to make because that sets up the disadvantage that Kevin's making later on. That says, that the businesses want people who are qualified, who understand the world, who can function in a variety of circumstances, and the 4-year degrees matter because those are the people that they're looking for, people who are qualified, that sort of thing. Sometimes your arguments sound like you're actually backing up what the advocates are saying. There are a couple of points where you're in essence saying, here's a better way that they should be arguing for this position. And that seemed a little